Yashakayach, the people organized it, and Rabbi Tarragan, Barosham. We will be learning Daseres HaDibros, the most momentous event in Klal Yisrael's history. And we have to ask ourselves, what was said in Daseres HaDibros? And actually, what was the first commandment in Daseres HaDibros? It's not even that clear. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, asher tzeicha me'eretz Mitzrayim beis avodim. So many of the Rishonim, most Rishonim, understand this to be a commandment. It's not written as a commandment, it's written as a statement of fact. And the Rambam in Sefer Mitzvos says, it is the mitzvah to believe in the divine entity. And he describes it, there is the cause and the root that is constantly running the world, which is a basic definition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we understand it. And then the Rambam proves that Anochi is actually a commandment from the Gemara in Makis. So this actually has raised a lot of questions because it's a logical paradox. You can't tell somebody a commandment to believe. Either person believes, doesn't believe. It's a prerequisite, and that's why quite a few of the Rishonim disagree with that. And they ask about why it is that, how is it that you can command somebody to believe? It can't be. There's no point to it. Different ways of asking the question. Many of the answers run along the lines of that we're always commanded to intensify, to strengthen, and so on. But I'd like to try to understand it in its context. Why is this Anochi Hashem Elokecha a statement of fact? It is presented as a statement of fact. It's not written as ta'amin, teida, or anything like that. And it's written as an introduction. It's not written as a commandment. So besides the logical paradox, I'd like to understand a little bit its structural connection to the rest of it. Yes, assume it's a mitzvah, how does it connect structurally? So a Mechilta over here says, Lo yeh lecha lehim acherim. This is a sort of the segue. Anochi Hashem Elokecha segues in Lo yeh lecha lehim acherim. Loma nemar, or lema nemar, or in what context was it said? So the Mechilta says, Lefi shenemar Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It's a mashal to a king that came into a new country. He conquered, annexed, or whatever. So they said, we would like you. His slaves, his servants said, why don't you tell us what to do? So he told them, when you will accept my, when you'll validate my rule, my monarchy, that's when I'll have gzeiros. Because if you don't accept my monarchy, my rule, then you're not going to accept my commandments. So too, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, you're mekabel my malchus, and then you're going to be mekabel my gzeiros. Now, if you look at it a little closely, it is a bit strange. In other words, they're coming and asking. They're knocking on the king's door, and they're saying, Mr. King, or however you address a king, tell us what to do. And says, no, I first all want everybody to say, long live the king, and then we'll go with it. What's the point of it? He says, because you're not going to listen to me, but they came to him. So whether they came to him out of a sense of they were scared of him, or they liked what he had to say, or anything like that, they were there. I want to look at this Chazal another time. Chazal say, it says, Amrullah Avadav, his slaves, servants, however you want to call them, came. In other words, their status is already pre-recorded. This is not a new group of people that said, Mr. King, would you like to tell us what to do? they're already called avodim. So what difference does it make? So they're subordinate. My assumption is the king has marched in with tanks and planes, or whatever tanks and planes they had, and has told them, and they knew the game is up. So they're scared, they're servants. So what's this game of getting up and saying, you're the king? It's the same thing we can ask ourselves every day in Krishma. Every day in Krishma, we have three parshas. One parsha of Shema, one parsha of Vayim Shemoah, one parsha of Tzitzis. The Mishnah asks, what's the order of it? And the assumption of why the Mishnah is asking is because Tzitzis is out of order. Tzitzis should have been first if it was following the order of the Torah. So the Mishnah says, so obviously the order is very structural. And first is Shema, which is Mekabel Ol Malchus Shemayim. Then you have a Hoyim Shemoah, which is a Mekabel Ol Mitzvos. And finally, Vayomer. So let's ask ourselves, the point of the Torah is to keep mitzvahs. Imagine I'm trying to convince somebody to be Shomer Shabbos. So I can't tell the guy, listen, you got to be Shomer Shabbos. It says in Shulchan Aruch, a whole volume of Shulchan Aruch. That's not going to work. So we talk about God, there is a God, and we talk about God that gave the Torah and the consequences and so on and so forth until we reach keeping Shabbos. But if a guy comes to me and he says, Rabbi, I'd love to keep Shabbos, I want to keep Shabbos, teach me the halachas. Would I start from God and proving God and so on? No, the guy, he's there. So if we were to say every morning, Kabbalas ol mitzvahs, Hashem, I'm ready to do the mitzvahs, would there be a reason why I would need to have also Kabbalas Matmayim? What am I gaining by that? I understand for the person who's not committed, we start with a platform as to why it's important to be committed. But what's the point of having somebody who is who's already committed? So let's every morning declare, Ribbon Shalom, I'm ready to do the mitzvahs. Somebody who's got trouble with emunah, fine. Let's deal with let him. Let's figure out a way for him to have emunah. But what's the point of this over here? So let's try to understand a little bit about the broad motive for mitzvahs, or anything. Let's get away a minute from the world of Torah. Let's take something else. Imagine somebody tells us, if it's a young boy, young child, a parent tells him, don't drink the soda, drink the milk. So I will comply because there is some sort of consequence one way or the other. Minimally, a lot of nagging, maybe some, reward, maybe something deprived. It's a good motive. It's a motive. Listen, I don't want to be yelled at. I don't want to be annoyed on this. I won't drink the soda. I'll drink the milk. I'll do whatever I need to do. And that is a motivation. It's and I could even say, well, there might be 100% success, and that's fine. The next type of motivation is I go to a doctor. I'm an older person. I go to a doctor, and the doctor says, don't eat this. Don't eat meat. Now, and I tell somebody the doctor strictly forbade me to eat meat. Now, that word forbade me is actually, it's a bit of misuse for the word. What actually happened is the doctor informed me. The doctor is somebody who's knowledgeable. He understands what my weaknesses are, and he understands what can cause me some sort of illness or whatever, and he's informed me of it, and therefore I make a decision that this is what I want to do, this is what I don't want to do. So we have two sets of motivations to do or not to do something, where somebody else telling me to do something could work. Neither of these two motivations are what we're talking about. Let's go to a third case. And this is much harder. A person wants to obey the laws of the land, not because of the consequences, but because he feels it's right. He feels people should obey the laws of the country that's their country. Now, it's a value. It's a moral value of sorts. So his only question is, who is the valid authority to tell me that? So in the States and most democracies, you'll have some sort of legislative body which becomes the law of the land, and or a court that validates it or negates it and so on. So now when I'm obeying, it's a different type of obeying. It's not consequence. It's not information about, it's not an imposition of someone's will with consequences or rewards. It's not informative as to what is good or not good, but rather there's just the concept of it is authority with a capital A, and a person needs to obey authority. It's a concept that we only understand it in terms of a country, and we can understand it in a utilitarian way of if everybody does what they want, there'll be absolute anarchy and bedlam, but people feel it's right. Let's try to understand now. Let's go back to the Midrash over here. The king marches into a country. His servants come out and say, tell us what to do. Now, understand something. A servant does not obey a master because it is morally right to obey the master. It's not an acceptance of authority. It's an imposition of strength. There is a whip, implied or in fact, or worse, and that forces me. So if I see a conqueror come in and he's got the strength, he conquered the country and he's opposed himself, I want to be on the safe side. So his avodim, they came to him as slaves, servants. That's a reality. A slave or a servant is not a status as much as a reality. There's a guy with a big stick who's conquered. So I say, okay, I'm ready to do what you want, do. This king is a very different type of king. And this king is somebody who wants his country to be a realization of vision, of a monarchy, where the king is the one who sets the goal or the picture country, and the subjects obey the way the body obeys the head, the way the person's limbs obey his brain. It's something where the authority of a king as authority, their picture and true picture of authority was a king. Melech Yisrael is to be obeyed because he's Melech Yisrael. He said, no, I'm not interested in people doing things. I'm interested in people carrying out my will. And unless you subscribe to it, we're not getting anywhere. So if you mekabel my malchus, that's going to happen. So one Chazal, which teaches us that the idea of imposition of ability to impose is not the right picture of carrying out what Hashem wants. We're not carrying out what He wants because He doesn't want us to do things. He doesn't need us to put on tzitzis. He needs us for something else. Another Chazal, and this illuminates a different aspect of what is not appropriate. This is a Midrash in Bamidbar on Parashas Chukas. It says, a guy asked Rabbi Yochanan, look at this paraduma stuff that you guys are doing. It's huji-wuji. You take a cow, you burn it, you crush it, you take the earth, you mix it with water, you spray it on people, and you tell them you're pure. So Rabbi Zakai replied and said, has anybody been affected by mental illness in your family? And he says, yes. So he said, and how do you treat it? Well, you bring all of these types of herbs, you smoke them, you crush them, you grind them, you put in water, you do something very similar to this. So you see, he says, take a look, he says, that's exactly the same thing over here. Amalei said, well, it's the exact same scenario. The guy left, and his Talmidim came to him, and they said, him you pushed away with like, a kana is like a reed, a small stick. You got him, you got rid of him real quick. But what are you going to tell us? So he tells them, Kindalach, he says, there's no tumah, there's no taira. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Chuka chakakti gzer gazarti, yet lav gzer reisa. Now, if we ask ourselves, the guy got the better end of the deal. I mean, the guy got a good answer. I mean, the answer that he got was, he showed him how a very similar process heals. I mean, he basically said, "Ishmos lecha masher picha omer." You're saying the same exact thing. And his Talmidim, he said, "We don't know. It's not. None of this makes sense. Hashem said so, and that's it." I think the guy got the better end of the deal. What was this? What was he telling his Talmidim? So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was addressing exactly the second point of what Torah is not. The guy who doesn't understand Malchus Shemaim, we understand it, understands the world as having positive things, negative things, and Torah as being informative. God has let us understand what's beneficial, what's harmful. So to obey God is like to obey a doctor. And we use the term, I obeyed the doctor's orders, he forbade me to eat this, he instructed me to eat this. Yeah, it sounds like that. But really what the doctor is, he's a Google of sorts. You have this, you should do this. You have that, you should do that. I trust the doctor's opinion, and I listen because I'm fulfilling my own desires and so on. That answer is perfectly legitimate for a guy, for the Umas Olam. It is not legitimate for Klal Yisrael, because we understand it goes the other way around. We understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is authority, and therefore we follow through because of it. If I can even give some sort of parallel to it, a philosopher will ask himself, what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong? And if it doesn't make any sense, it's not a philosophy. A scientist will ask himself, what is there? What has been put into nature? He doesn't use the word put into nature, but what is in nature? And he builds his theories around it. And if he can't come up with a theory, it's tough luck. It still exists. So the guy approached God and a Torah as being informative, and therefore I need to present it in a way that I can understand how it's good for you, bad for you. We start with the premise that good and bad starts with Hashem. Whatever it is that the divine will is good, whatever the divine will is bad. We can relate to some of it, we can actually integrate some of it, and some of it we just remain standing, like a scientist. Some of the stuff makes so much sense, some of the stuff is bewildering, but we never change reality to fit what is. So let's go back again to our original question, and let's understand what Torah is, what the Ten Commandments are. What's unique about Klal Yisrael's Torah? Klal Yisrael's Torah starts with Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It's not a belief that there is a God and He can do. That's a prerequisite. They're right. That's something which, if we don't have it, we need somebody to introduce us to it. It's not something that the Torah can command us to do. The Torah is commanding us and giving us the introduction. All of Torah and mitzvahs must rest on the principle that Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Anochi is a very, very firm form of I. Ani is the I of circumstance. I happen to exist at this time, this place. Anochi is very strong emphasis. It means I am in a very, very firm existential way. God is existence itself. And everything starts with that. First and foremost, morality, good and bad. All mitzvahs must flow from that understanding. The way a scientist starts with facts, and all theories and all hypotheses need to start with the facts. If it's a beautiful theory of hypotheses and the facts are off, then tough luck. Philosophy starts with the idea, and then I try to fit circumstance to fit it. Anoch Hashem, the first mitzvah, is the basis for keeping Torah and mitzvahs, is this sense that Hashem is existence itself, and the only thing. It means the basis for physical existence. It means the basis for right and wrong. We're obligated to study and try to understand it, and that's Torah. But and if we don't accept it, then that's not the type of mitzvahs Hashem really wants from us. So that's exactly the Chazal. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and we come and say, what are the good things to do? And Hashem says, no, there are no good things to do. The first thing is you need to subscribe to the fact that I am. And just like there is no physical existence and no other existence except from me, morality and good and bad come from me. Once that point is there, let me tell you what is the morality that is me and mine. And following that is called keeping Torah mitzvahs. In Eretz Hashem, it's going to be a very, very unique situation this year at Shavuos. We won't have the Barovam Hadras Melech, the ability to come together and have that special feel of everybody sitting together learning. But it's time to think a bit and understanding that we differ. Umas ha'olam start with explanation and follow through with it. To them, a mitzvah can be explained and maybe should be explained. We start with the fact, it's a fact. The Shulchan Aruch is a fact. We struggle and we try to understand it. We may or may not understand, that's fine. But the yesod, the foundation is Kabbalah's Malchus Shamayim, that Hashem is, and His morality innate, and His authority. Once we have that in place, everything else follows from it. And Be'ez Hashem, we should be zocher again this Shavuos to be makabel both the sense of Maimar Asinai of HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying Anochi, that He is, and we should redouble and renew our efforts to keep all the mitzvahs that flow from that Anochi. Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged Harav.